Greetings and welcome to Superintendent's Corner. My name is Richard Safier, Superintendent of Schools, and this show is an opportunity to talk about what's exciting going on around the district, to discuss our successes, our challenges, and the issues that many in the district face. More importantly, we get a chance to talk to the people that are involved with what is happening at the district, and it's my distinct pleasure tonight to talk to 4 of the 5 students who recently have been involved in what's referred to as the Youth Moose Awareness Program. So I'd like to introduce, beginning on my left, Miss Jessie Alexander. Greetings.
Hello.
And Brendan Smith, and Delaney Benchoff, and Rachael Belanger. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Terrific. The Loyal Order of Moose has created this youth awareness initiative to give students an opportunity to learn how to speak publicly, how to make presentations, how to compete, and just get an overall sense of building confidence while also communicating to students who are younger than them, students at the elementary school. The Loyal Order of Moose initiative first evolved as part of the Just Say No to Drugs program. If people remember Nancy Reagan, former President Ronald Reagan's wife, it was launched back in 1986. These students have spoken to, they must have done over 100 presentations to our students here in the Gloucester Public School District in grades K through 4. They also had an opportunity to attend a state-level congress, which took place in the month of October or so? Yeah, sometime in October, where many schools from across the state came and had an opportunity to do their presentations before a different, broader, and perhaps a more challenging audience. These particular students have been selected, A, because they are outstanding high school students and their careers to date have been really terrific, and because they have a willingness to give back to the community, which has supported them as well. The last thing I will add before I start asking some questions is that they've been mentored, and these folks have been involved in this program for a number of years by the Gloucester High School English teacher Zachary Roy, former Gloucester School Committee chairperson and now counselor of the City Council, Ms. Val Gilman, and the former GHS MCAS coordinator, Mr. Don Riley. In addition, Ms. Linda O'Malley is the liaison between the Moose Lodge and the school district. So terrific. Well, I've had a chance to introduce you, but Jessie, can we start? Just tell us a little something about yourself.
Yeah. So at the high school, I am a tri-sport varsity athlete. I also am in Gloucester's Student Council, Gloucester's Interact Club, Gloucester's Youth Awareness Program, and then I'm a staff writer for the Gillnetter.
Ah, terrific. And it's a great publication, by the way. Great. How about you, Brandon?
Yeah, so I'm a senior at Gloucester High School, where I'm the president of the National Honor Society. I'm on the Interact board. I'm an Interact board member, student council representative, and then lastly, I'm also like a Pathways team mentor. Oh,
Pathways team mentor as well, huh?
Yeah.
Interesting. Great. Delaney.
Wow, at the high school, I am the DECA president. I am the Interact Club president. I am the Student Council Executive Board treasurer and a part of the Youth Awareness Program as well. And I am a senior dancer and competitor in the K-Band Performance Company in Beverly.
Terrific. Thank you. And Ms. Belanger.
So like the rest of them, I'm also a senior, and I'm on the Interact board. I'm also on the NHS, so the National Honor Society board, and I'm also in Student Council.
Right. NHS induction ceremony is coming up this Thursday,
Yeah.
if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken.
March
Looking forward to
28th.
it. It's always a great ceremony. It's really great. So, Rachel, how do you feel about public speaking?
Not bad. I used to definitely hate it, but now it's not that bad. I honestly, especially talking to the little kids, I found that really fun.
Yeah, there's an old joke that says the 2 things that people fear the most are death and public speaking, but not necessarily in that order. So that's why I asked the question. How about you folks? Duck to water or a challenge?
Before doing this, I kind of feared it, but I became more comfortable, and we did the helper model. And I feel really comfortable now after going in front of the classes, and it's going to help me on NHS induction night because I'm going to be speaking a lot that night.
That's right. Yeah. Scholarship, but you're the sort of the host.
Yeah.
You carry the torch. Terrific. Yeah. How about yourself?
Yeah, so I mean, I've always been pretty comfortable with public speaking. When I was younger, I used to do like the O'Malley plays. I'd love to like be in front of a crowd. Obviously, I think it's a little different when you're speaking to little kids because you kind of have to change the direction and the way you speak to them. So it's definitely a challenge because you're kind of their mentors. They look up to you. So it's definitely very different, but
Yeah.
I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, you have to know your audience.
Yeah.
And you guys are killing me because I struggled. It's something that had to evolve as I became an administrator and in my adult life to be comfortable speaking publicly. So you guys are well ahead of the game. That's great. So about how many skits have you personally done?
I personally
before?
did 13.
13 or so? And-
I did 15.
I did 13.
I also did 13.
Okay, so it's about around 13 to 15 different skits. And were you all at the same schools, or did you vary by school, Jessie?
So we all went to the same schools, but we all had different classrooms. So we didn't all go to the same classroom. I think that way we did it so every single classroom got a talk. Could be a different talk, but every single school and every single classroom.
Right. And picking up on what you said earlier, is it different talking to fourth graders as opposed to second graders and the like?
Very different.
Definitely.
Yeah.
To keep their attention?
Yeah.
Quite a challenge. But part of this is you come in with a certain measure of confidence, which is great. And like any other skill, it has to be crafted. And my understanding is that your coaches have worked with you in what's referred to as the helper model in your practice sessions. Who'd like to speak to that?
Sure, I would love to. So, from the help of Ms. Gilman and Mrs. O'Malley, as well as Mr. Roy and everything, we would meet about once a month on a Tuesday and kind of sit down, and each person would go through their presentation. And what would happen is the people that were in the audience watching the presentation would have a piece of paper and split up comments into positive feedback of what they thought went really well, and then feedback to work on that could be added into the presentation or altered a little bit. And after we would do that, once the presenter was finished, they would talk about what they thought they did well and then what they thought they needed to work on. And we would go around as a class and kind of share each of that. And I think that really helped in terms of figuring out what was really good and what to focus on keeping and what also we need to incorporate a little bit more
Right.
of as we progress throughout the time.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is not only are you getting feedback from the outside, but you're also being asked to be self-critical at the same time.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Were you all comfortable with that?
It's a little hard to be, like, I found it more a little bit hard to just, like, pick out positive things sometimes, but
Oh, well, we tend to be
yeah, just a little bit self-critical,
the
but
self-consciousness and all that business, yeah.
But yeah, it was pretty helpful actually being able to see like what things we did good, we did well, and to remember to keep up with those things and maybe like add on to that. And it was also good to see which things we maybe needed to tweak a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's two ways of looking at how we correct ourselves. One is we look at our weaknesses and we try to strengthen the weaknesses, but sometimes we do that to the detriment of not continually strengthening our strengths as well.
Right.
And it sounds as though this helper model process gives you a chance to sort of balance that out and get past some of that self-abnegation or what have you, which we all experience and the like. Great. So let's start talking a little bit about the topics and such. And Jessie, let's begin with you. What was the topic and why did you choose that?
So my topic was how to maintain a positive self-image. So I noticed that in high school, it's very hard to look at yourself in a positive way. And I really think that that's important, something very important that we stress at a young age, to look at yourself positively and to realize that you're great no matter what. And so for my skit, what I did was I did like a little photo booth kind of. So I have a Polaroid camera.
Yeah.
And so I used that and I got some props. So I split the kids into two groups. One group would take a picture not smiling without the props, and then one group would take a picture with the props smiling, and then they'd switch and the other group would do the other thing. And I tried to show them that they looked like they were having a lot more fun when they were smiling and they were happy, and how when you're positive in your own skin, it makes you feel a lot better about yourself.
Mm-hmm. There's obviously a different stage of development between a student of high school age and an elementary school student, and the type of self-consciousness. Did you find that there were any barriers for them to understand where you were going with this?
So originally I thought that there would be, but then I asked the question at the beginning. I said, have any of you ever been in a picture where you didn't feel good about yourself? And I was very surprised to see that the majority of the kids raised their hands. And they all had something to say about how they saw a picture of themselves that they didn't like, why they didn't like it, and the reasons to that. And I was very surprised that they were also just as critical of themselves as someone in high school would be. Yeah. So I think that's why it was important.
Great, we learned it at an early age. Well, that's really interesting. Thank you so much. How about you, Brandon?
So I chose the topic of having anxiety and how to deal with it and kind of cope with it. And I chose this because as a young kid, I always got very nervous about everything, about sports games and tests and meeting new people. And then when I was in 7th grade, I kind of came to the realization that I needed to seek help for it. And Dan Graham over at O'Malley really helped me with this. And one of the activities he had me do was to draw how my body reacted when I was really nervous. And so that gave me the idea to have my activity in this event be that and have the kids draw how they felt when they got really nervous.
Yeah, yeah. Performance anxiety is something that many people experience. There are stories of master classical pianists who were, just not even almost able to go on stage, and then once they did, they performed really well. We provided an opportunity last week for some teachers to be engaged in a mindfulness program. We brought this gentleman to come in and work with them, and there's like an 8-week group of sessions, about 20 teachers. There was a much bigger demand for it. But the whole point of the mindfulness is also to deal with the strains and the stresses and the anxieties that every one of us experiences. And getting a command of that is part of the challenge of being human without feeling embarrassed by it and so on and so forth. Yeah. Great. Terrific. Delaney, how about yourself?
So my presentation was about a couple of different things all put together, but the main focus of it was how to talk to new people and how that leads to making friends and what it means to be a good friend. And I kind of incorporated all of that and really got the kids talking about how to go out of their way to make new friends. And we had a really fun activity, which I put some question prompts and some pictures for the younger kids inside Easter eggs, and we would break the class up into color groups with the Easter eggs, and the kids were wicked excited about that. And it kind of got them talking with one another and asking the questions inside and seeing if they could come up with anything in common, or if they couldn't come up with anything in common, using their listening skills to listen to one another and reflect back on that later. And it was a really great experience for all of the kids to kind of work on listening and that aspect of being a good friend, as well as realizing that learning new things about other people and finding shared traits will lead to making new friends as well. So
interesting. I can't help myself but comment on these because I find them very, very interesting. But if you get a chance to read the New York Times today, David Leonard has written an article about an economist who just passed away, and his major focus was on happiness. And it's odd that we would think of economists thinking in terms of what happiness is all about. And one of the things that the economist related to the newspaper person is that even when he didn't want to go out to social gatherings, he would do so because the contact, talking to people, making the friends, exactly what you're describing, is what would make him most happy. And as an economist, he was looking to find ways that the economy can provide the greatest good for the most people and all the rest. Not as long an article as it takes me to explain it, but a very interesting one as well. And Rachel, how about your topic?
So my topic was communication skills and basically just learn to use your words. And I came up with this when I was thinking back to 3 little kids that I used to babysit, and a lot of the times they would get in arguments and fights, and they wouldn't realize that they need to use their words and talk things out.
Right.
And so they'd end up throwing things at each other, and it just wasn't good. And I realized that inability to communicate your feelings and really talk things through is something I've also kind of noticed in some high schoolers. So I figured it would be a good thing to just try and talk to the kids about. And so what I did was I came up with an activity. I would come up with an animal, and then I would have them ask me questions about the animal to figure out what I'm thinking of. And so that way they'd have to use their words to solve the problem and figure out what I'm thinking of.
Right. Well, on Sunday, I have 2 grandchildren, a 2-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old grandson, and they both took turns throughout the course of the day pinching one another. So we were faced with exactly the types of communication challenges that you were attempting to examine with the students that you spoke to. That's terrific. Well, thank you. Each of them seemed creative, vital, and personal as well, and I think some of the best things that we can communicate are the things that we know and understand personally. So that's much to your credit. Going back to some of the technicalities, are there rules that you have to follow in delivering your talks to make you potentially eligible for scholarship awards? Were there rules? Like, I guess perhaps I'm transitioning towards the Congress and such.
Yeah, well, not as many formatted rules in terms of the presentation, but we had to fill out some paperwork and get some signatures, but also kind of it wasn't really an embedded rule, but leaving the students with something to kind of take home and think back to the presentation throughout the day, or engage their parents and having a conversation about it. That was something that we kind of talked about as one of the big things.
I think we also had to make sure the students were in between the ages of 4 and 9.
Yeah.
I think we also had to make sure our presentation didn't go more than 20 minutes.
Yes.
Oh, so some guidelines,
Yeah.
some strictures.
We also we were required to do the Congress before, so that was a requirement. We had to go to the Congress. So Mr. Mass, who is the Mass Rhode Island leader, I'd say, he had to speak to us about it and kind of like prep us for what was to come. And for the Gloucester Moose program, we were required to do 12 talks. So everyone had to do 12 in order to.
Yeah. Oh, so there were a couple of guidelines and
Yeah.
the like. Good. You did start to speak about this a little bit, but maybe you could just amplify it just a little bit about your student audience's reaction and what sorts of questions did they have for you? You want to start with that, Jess?
Yeah, so some questions. Yeah, so a lot of them, like as you were saying, 4th and 2nd graders were very different. So a lot of the 4th graders had some more like engaging questions for me. Like they were like, oh, well, why should I feel happy when I like look good? And obviously that's a very pressing question for me to answer. And I'd say to them, you don't have to look good to be happy. Like it's not all about appearance, and that's kind of what I was trying to stress to them. It's as long as you feel happy in your own skin looking at yourself. So they like the 4th graders were asking me like, oh, well, I don't like to smile, or why should I have to smile in a picture? And I said, you don't have to smile in a picture as long as you look at the picture and you see yourself in the picture.
Right. At the elementary level, there's a phase, I think, whereby students experience anxiety but may not be self-aware. And then there's a point at which perhaps they understand that I'm feeling anxious. How did that play in, if at all, to how your students responded to your presentation, and did they have questions for you?
Yeah, so before I gave my first presentation, I was really worried about how they would react and how they might not feel the same way that I did at that age. But my first question to them was, how many of you guys have ever felt really nervous? You know, pretty much everyone in the room raised their hand. And so they all kind of reacted in the same way that I did. And so my presentation really, I think, was a success because so many of them could relate to it.
Perhaps the ones that didn't put their hands up were the ones that were most anxious.
Yeah, right.
How about you, Delaney?
Well, I was also kind of nervous going into my first couple skits that the kids wouldn't be overly engaged with my activity and that it would be considered boring for them. But I was surprised to find that throughout my entire presentations, kids ages 10 through 4 or 5 alike were so excited when it came to Easter eggs, especially since it was coming up right around Easter. And they love the idea of kind of getting into their own groups and having conversations with their peers and just interacting with one another, and not really having as much of a presentation type format. I think that was really exciting for them as well.
It sounds a little bit like you had a bit of an example of what teachers sometimes experience early in the school year. They may be veterans, but it's a new class, new dynamics, new expectations. There's always that little, feeling and the little butterflies in the stomach and stuff as they prepare. And what you described sounds similar to me as well. And let's see, Rachel, you were working on communication skills. So with communication, the kids had to have questions, right?
I honestly didn't really get many questions. They all pretty much got it right away, which I was pretty happy about.
Yeah.
One thing that I was a little afraid of was that it would be like my game and just using your words would be a little bit too simple for the 4th graders. So for them, I kind of switched it up a little bit to just communicating and just talking things through and expressing your feelings.
Yeah.
And they all understood it pretty well and were really good at communicating with me, which I was really impressed by.
Yeah, that's interesting. It raises a question which I really hadn't prepared to ask. But did you feel that you had to transition or modify your presentations midstream as you're in the act of doing it?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Sometimes.
So for my first presentation, I was planning on doing 2 activities, but I had to cut one out so that it fit the time schedule.
Time factor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's you live and learn on that one.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to comment on that?
Yeah, so for mine, like I said, I had questions embedded in the Easter eggs, and it took Ms. Gilman and I a little bit of working together to realize that with the younger kids in the kindergarten, 1st graders, that it wouldn't go as easily because they're not as skilled with reading and writing. So we came up with a new kind of altercation in which we put more simple, broad questions and put a picture that kind of prompted the question. And the teacher aides were extremely helpful throughout my presentations, but it definitely was easier for the kids to understand what we were discussing.
In teaching, there's a term for what you're describing. It's called provisioning, so that if a teacher is going to hand out crayons, or if they're going to show a video in a high school class or something, making sure that the technology is ready, making sure that the crayon's in the right place, so that the thing really flows. And of course, I remember as a first-year teacher, I had this much prepared, and I got about that much done in class. So you learn the whole ratio and proportion piece as well. Did you want to comment well, you actually did, about the variation midstream while presenting? I don't know if you want to add anything to that or not.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, you good? Okay. So let's transition to what had came before the presentations before the Gloucester High School Elementary School students, and that was your visit to the Massachusetts State House. First question is, what do you think of State House?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was
I mean, the building, the edifice, the inside, I'm talking, what it looked like, and I was blown away when I went there for the first time. I thought it was just a beautiful, beautiful building. No?
It was really nice.
Nobody's
Yeah,
too
it
impressed,
was.
huh?
They had
Next
great
question.
food. It was good.
It was great, yeah.
All right. So tell us, would you like to start? Can you tell us a little bit about the trip to the Massachusetts State House and what that entailed?
So basically, well, first of all, they just kind of talked to us about a little bit of the background behind the moose and everything. And then they had us split up into groups. And what they would do is basically we had to kind of come up with what we had to do ourselves, which was in our group we would decide on a topic, and then we would kind of plan it out and come up with a way to, like an activity or something to play.
Right.
And then we would go up in our groups and present in front of everyone our idea and our skit, and basically just kind of like a quick little overview of what we would do.
Right.
And so it was just kind of like planning out like a practice of what we would later be doing
So
ourselves.
this takes place before you go to the elementary schools, and
Yep.
that's,
Yes.
for example, your whole notion about communications. That's when you started to, put some legs on that idea.
Yep.
Right. Good. Anybody else want to comment on their experience at the State House before we get into the awards?
I thought it was a great opportunity because we broke up into, I think, 3 or 4 groups, I'm not positive, but it was really cool because we not only got to think as a group of a topic and work through different activities and presentations that we could do, but we got to see what other people came up with as well.
Right.
And I know I was blown away by some of the other groups, which we were all spread out into, but some of the ideas and activities that they all came up with in activities that I do with my campers every summer are just things that you kind of see all the time that you never really think to put in a classroom or in a presentation was really cool to me.
Good.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool going there because when they split us up into the groups to do our activity, there were a lot of people that I met, and it was really interesting because some of them had already done the program before, so they were able to give me some insight like into how to do it and like tips to how to make it flow and things like that. And I thought it was really nice to talk to someone who had actually been through it my age and like them to give me insight to what was to come.
Great. You're starting to segue into my next question is, one way of saying it is, what did you hope to achieve by your participation in the Youth Awareness Program? Another way of asking the same question is what have you come away with, and how is this, how is it going to be of benefit going forward? Would you like to start, Rachael?
Sure. For me, the main thing that I kind of was looking to get out of this was just the experience, planning something out, going through with it, talking in front of people, meeting new people.
Yeah.
And I feel like it really did help me with a lot of public speaking. Like before I would walk into the classrooms or talk to the elementary school teachers, I would always get a little bit nervous. But once I get started, I realized how fun it was.
Great.
And I just feel a lot better about speaking in public overall now, and I think that that's a really good thing that I got out of it.
Yeah, I'm going to ask all 3 of you as well, but can you be overly prepared when it comes to public presentations?
No.
Yeah.
That's the answer I was expecting. The answer that I experience as well. It's the more prepared you are, the more you can sort of, if there are ebbs and flows in what you're doing, and there are those moments of hesitation because of the practice. It really helps you to push through those barriers and such.
Definitely.
Yeah. So what did you hope to get out of it, Delaney?
Well, personally, I worked with a lot of children for the past 4 years as a camp counselor, but I really wanted this experience, as my sister went through it a couple of years ago, to kind of help the kids and understand and kind of make a difference in how they see things throughout their life. But personally, I used it as a public speaking activity, but it really was just me for fun and like having an impact on the kids, and that was really the important part of it for me.
Yeah, good. Terrific.
Yeah, so I was hoping to get some public speaking experience and to kind of be able to spread awareness about a topic that I'm super passionate about.
Yeah.
But something that I kind of came up with recently was it was really a chance to like kind of self-reflect and to think like, it's crazy that I was sitting in those seats 10 years ago, and now next year I'll be in college, and I'm an adult.
I know that one. I know that one. So I'll guess that I'll probably ask a college question, although we're starting to run out of time. But I wouldn't be surprised if you decided to at least consider psychology as a future.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah. And what do you hope to get out of it?
Yeah, so definitely I really wanted to make an impact in the kids' lives, and so it was funny because about a month after my last presentation, I was in the attendance office. I don't know why, but I was talking to the attendance lady, Miss Lawson, and she told me she was in her car the other day. She was asking me about the Youth Awareness Program, and she was like, "Were you the one who was talking about smiling and like happiness?" And I was like, "Yeah, I was." And so she was like, "Yeah, my granddaughter and I were in the car the other day, and like the day that I was doing the presentation, and she was telling me about how she got a paper from me about like smiling and what she learned, and they were talking about it in the car." And I was like, wow, like it was really like exciting for me to hear that they had actually talked to their parents about it or talked to their grandparents about it, and that I had made an impact. So that was definitely
that is
very
great.
rewarding.
And particularly for this side of the table, but for everybody, there is a field of psychology called positive psychology. Psychology's origins are really kind of grounded in pathology and what happens when things go wrong, but there's a whole nother area called positive psychology. One of the guys that you might want to look into is a psychologist by the name of Martin Seligman, and there are other names as well, but it's something that you might be interested in, looking on the bright side of things. Before we close off, I also want to mention that Jesse, at the Congress, you came in second place in the Massachusetts Rhode Island competition. Delaney, you came in third, and Rachael, you came in eighth, and Brendan, somewhere around 11th.
Probably 11th. Yeah.
Everybody's at least in the top third. And listen, it's not really about winning, but it's great if it happens, but it's really about participating. And you're going to be going on to the internationals in the city of brotherly love in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So congratulations.
Thank you.
It's great to talk to you. As an educator, it's really energizing for me to hear about your experiences and your positive experiences, and even more importantly, the contributions you made towards shaping young lives and stuff. So thank you so very much for that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for
And
having
for
us.
this segment of Superintendent's Corner, I say thank you and good night.